On this day, 1995, the futuristic sci-fi action thriller Virtuosity, starring future Best Actor Oscar winners Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe, opens in theaters.
The computer changed the program. Now, he's in the real world.
He's interactive.
On your knees, now!
He doesn't enjoy the game unless he's playing against his favorite opponent, and that's me.
From the director of Lawnmower Man.
He's recreating mass murders.
So you're saying Sid's a copycat?
Sid 6.7 is intent on improving the original.
Denzel Washington.
Just because I'm carrying around the joy of killing your family inside me doesn't mean we can't be friends.
Virtuosity.
Game over.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday morning here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Another movie anniversary, not a particularly good movie, but notable nevertheless for the two principals starring in this film. On this day, 1995, saw the release of Leonard, filmmaker. He had also done the adaptation, although Stephen King wouldn't like me saying that, but the adaptation of Stephen King's book, The Lawnmower Man, a movie that starred a pre-James Bond Pierce Brosnan and an actor I always thought was very, very interesting performer, Jeff Fahey. Jeff Fahey had this kind of unconventional, ultra-minimalist style that he used in a lot of different films, but he's a very interesting face. For those who don't know who he is, I mean, of course you could Google him, but the kid who's on Cobra Kai, who plays Robbie, Tanner Buchanan, he looks a lot like him. The facial structure is almost identical. In fact, when I saw Tanner Buchanan for the first time in Cobra Kai, I said, oh, that must be Jeff Fahey's son. Like, that's how much, to me, they look alike. But Leonard is a talented filmmaker, and he was using concepts and dealing with concepts in movies that really hadn't been done before. Unfortunately, just because you do something first, it doesn't mean that you necessarily do it best or get it right. And in the case of The Lawnmower Man, the script was very slack. And it had nothing to do with Stephen King's original story. And that was part of the King's problem. It wasn't that he thought the movie sucked. It's that this is not my book. This is not my story. And you went ahead and made a movie and you wanted to market it as Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man. It's not Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man. It's someone's interpretation of about 2% of my story. Get my name off the movie, please. And they ended up having to take his name off the movie. Now, another film that came out right around that same time, Sleepwalkers. It's okay. I saw that in theaters. It's not great. King wrote that. He wrote that screenplay. That was not based on a book. And the kind of gag that was told when that movie was being promoted was that this is the first time that Stephen King has written something directly for the screen instead of screen. You know, it's so clever when you're 18, something like that in 1992 passes for, wow, that's really funny. So Virtuosity deals with concepts that would be later modified and repackaged, reformulated for The Matrix. To be fair also, though, to the Wachowskis, they sold the screenplay for The Matrix before Virtuosity. So it's not, I'm not accusing them of, it wouldn't be plagiarism. I'm not even accusing them of getting inspiration from. The Matrix was wrapped. They sold that script before anyone heard of Virtuosity. But when technology evolves, people get different ideas. And even a movie like Dark City, which was Alex Proyas' visionary masterpiece I talked about on the channel, one of the best movies you've never seen, some of you, that also deals with similar concepts. And The Matrix, the Wachowskis even used some of the sets and some of the concepts. It's not like plagiarism or theft. Artists get inspiration from other artists. It's just normal stuff. It's part of the creative process. And in most cases, you take it as a compliment. When, hey, somebody, I noticed that they cribbed something from what I did here, usually you're not going to get mad. Now, if somebody outright steals an entire, idea for a movie, that's different. But bits and pieces here and there, no big deal. So, Virtuosity is it purports to be visionary sci-fi, and it does have visionary elements. It has elements that were ahead of their time in 1995, but the script is just not that good. And unfortunately, within 5 minutes of the movie, I already was, not that I was mentally checking out, but the Denzel character, spoiler alert, Denzel's character was a cop. It's sometime in the future. I don't remember the year. And I'm not trying to be funny. The movie is 1995. I think it's like we haven't reached the year. This isn't Blade Runner where it's supposed to be 2019 and hey, we're 5 years past it and we still don't have flying cars. But it's supposed to be the future. And Denzel's character, we think that he is in the present day and he's trying to catch Russell Crowe, and it turns out it's like a computer program. And they're looking for a renegade computer program, which if this were the Matrix, they might say it's a virus. But he's looking for this renegade computer program, which is a serial killer called SID 6.7, Russell Crowe. But we realize less than 10 minutes into the movie that Denzel's character is not actually where we think he is and doing what we think he's doing. The movie opens with what amounts to the Matrix. So I called that, but it is a virtual reality sensory scenario where he is trying to locate a computer program that looks like a person. So all kinds of comparisons. But my issue right away with the movie is when it was shown that Denzel's character was imprisoned, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I didn't buy it, not for 1 second. And I've also seen movies where there is a bit of contortions of plot to make us believe that, well, this is what would happen. No, in this instance, I don't accept it. Any more so, to be fair, Demolition Man 2 years earlier, I don't for 1 second believe that what Stallone's character did would get him frozen forever. Frozen in carbonite, more or less. Nope, I didn't accept that either. And that to me was a problem with that film. They needed to come up with something better other than he's heroic, he's a great guy, but we're going to put him in jail for it. No, thank you. So that was my first problem with this movie. And I was engaged, I was entertained, but I also figured out, once we meet Russell Crowe's character, this serial killing computer program, he's eating some sushi, he seems to be having a good time. Russell's so young, I think he was 30 when the film was shot. For reference, Denzel was around 40. I also realized within 20 minutes of the movie, there was not going to be any attempt to do anything at all with Russell's character or Denzel's character. It was simply going to be cat and mouse, action sequences, a lot of CGI, computer graphics, and maybe there'd be a few surprises. But I was frustrated almost immediately by this film. Now you go on Rotten Tomatoes, it's in the 30s as far as fresh. So it's bad, but that's not a horrendous score. What it means is that 3 to 3.5 people out of 10 are going to recommend it. They're going to say, you know what? It's not perfect, but it's good enough. Now, I recommend anybody see this movie because if you're a fan of The Matrix, you will laugh and say, holy shit, it's amazing that this was years before The Matrix because they're doing a lot of the same things. And Denzel and Russell do not phone it in. And Russell was rising really fast. And unfortunately, in this film, he didn't have that much to work with. He was more constrained here than he was in Quick and the Dead, which came out earlier in 1995. Now, I've mentioned this before, but if you want to understand how and why Russell Crowe, a New Zealand actor who had mostly appeared in independent films overseas, such as Romper Stomper, The Sum of Us. If you want to see or understand how and why Russell Crowe became Russell Crowe, did he get lucky? No. He just had stupendous talent and an ability to command the screen when he was not even close to being a star. Watch the movie The Quick and the Dead, Sam Raimi's insane Western, with all-star cast. You almost forget it's Sharon Stone's movie because the supporting cast, including Russell and Gene Hackman and Leonardo DiCaprio, the supporting cast is just stupendous. Keith David, Lance Henriksen. It's worth watching just for the supporting cast. And Hackman is kind of funny. He won an Oscar for Unforgiven. He He plays the same kind of character here, only if anything, this guy's even worse. And that's saying something. But in The Quick and the Dead, Russell Crowe, his character, he's called Preacher. I think he's supposed to really be a preacher, but I don't even know. He's a gunfighter. And that is as dead and inert a role on the page as this one. But because The Quick and the Dead takes a little bit of care and it has enough interest in trying to develop character in between all of these crazy shootouts, Russell takes a nothing role and he becomes the best thing in that movie. I love Sharon Stone. You almost forget it's her movie. And Hackman pretty much repeats what he did in Unforgiven, only, as I say, his character is worse. And then the Keith Davids and Lance Henriksen's, they're not in the movie for that much. And DiCaprio's okay, but he's a little green. He's a little bit too young to play the part that he's playing. And I'm a big DiCaprio fan also, and so is Sharon Stone, who gave up a percentage of her salary because DiCaprio, they wanted to cast him, but they couldn't afford what he already was getting. And Sharon said something to the effect of, if you need an extra $250 for the kid, take it out of my cut. I want him in this movie. It'll be terrific, or whatever she said. And to this day, Sharon has talked about it, that she gives him, he gives her a nice Christmas gift every year. It's something that even 30 years later, he didn't forget. That she went out of her way and went to bat for him when nobody would have expected it. After you say the difference between Sharon pulling in $5 million versus 4.75 is not that big a deal, you're right. You would be right. But she still did it. She put her money where her mouth was, despite the insane amounts. But the idea with Russell Crowe is that this was a generational talent. Everything about him on screen is riveting. He commands the camera. Even in this movie, as he's just a co-star and a bad guy who has zero development, he's a computer program. He is somebody who he's in command. When he is on screen, he is who you see. Even when someone as strong as Denzel is there, you see Russell. Because he has an air of unpredictability, just as he did in Quick and the Dead. In this movie, that's the character, because he's a serial killer in the guise of a computer program, basically. The film itself, though, it's not great. It's entertaining. It has a couple of twists towards the end where you're not really sure. There's a lot of, is it live or is it Memorex? Or later we would say, wait, they're still in the Matrix here, or are they back in the real world? It's tough to tell sometimes. When I think of the movie, though, I think of the actors. How Denzel had already won an Oscar. He'd won a supporting actor Oscar. And many would argue that he should have won for Malcolm X. He should have won Best Actor for Malcolm X. And if you're asking me, he for sure should have won Best Actor for Philadelphia, which I will stand on it and go down on the hill that Denzel Washington's single finest piece of film acting is Jonathan Demme's Philadelphia. Tom Hanks won the Oscar. And everyone knew Tom Hanks was going to win the Oscar. Denzel didn't even get nominated. But in my estimation, a character just playing one note, even if it is a brilliant, technically spectacular one note, a la Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, I would always go for the person who shows stages and levels of change, that the character is actually, as much as it seems like a cliche, that the character actually has a purpose and an arc and is not simply existing within a narrative. And I love Tom Hanks, and his performance is terrific. He really makes you believe that he's this guy and he's dying. But his character is a really nice guy from first frame to last. He doesn't grow and change. He regresses health-wise. Denzel's character starts that film as basically a bigot, doesn't like gay people, and he's ignorant, and he thinks that if a person with AIDS maybe even just taps him on the shoulder to say, hey, Joe, good to see you, what if I get it from that? And he goes on a journey through his association with a guy who he really likes and, quite frankly, was a better lawyer than him. It's an incredible performance. But Denzel didn't even get nominated, and he lost Malcolm X because they kind of gave Al Pacino a career achievement award, even though he was still in his early 50s, and Big Al did better work in later movies than Scent of a Woman. He did a lot of screaming and yelling. Pacino's the man. I love Pacino. Who doesn't? Big Al. But Denzel was otherworldly in Malcolm X, and that is a performance where the character changes and is not in the same spot. Was it Malcolm Little? I forgot if that was his last name. But it is a galvanizing powerhouse performance that he gave. Now, in the case of Russell Crowe, I feel like the Oscar fucked up too, and Denzel's involved in this one. So that's why these two guys, I always thought there may have been a beef between them, but then they worked together in American Gangster, and there was no beef. Sometimes people just, the wrong person wins, more or less. So you skip ahead in time to 2000, 5 years after Virtuosity. Russell Crowe wins Best Actor for Gladiator, which ends up winning Best Picture. And I really like Gladiator. 2000 was a little bit of a soft year as far as, there were a lot of big hits, but it was a little bit of a soft year in terms of what we would call great movies. Much as the only year in the 90s, which is not to me a great year, 1995. Braveheart is the kind of historical epic that can win Oscars, but 95 is not a great year. And in that case, if you ask me who gives a better performance, if we're being honest, Mel Gibson in Braveheart or Russell Crowe in Gladiator, I'm going to go with Mel. Mel didn't even get the nomination, but he won the hardware. He won Best Picture and Best Director. And it was a bit of an upset, but there weren't that many. Once Ron Howard didn't get a nomination for Apollo 13, you knew Apollo 13 wasn't going to win Best Picture. And Oliver Stone's Nixon sure as fuck wasn't going to win Best Picture. Neither was Mike Figgis leaving Las Vegas. Those movies are all really good. In the case of Apollo 13, that's my pick for best film of that year. But in 2000, Russell Crowe wins Best Actor for Gladiator, and I remember being happy that he won. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. And this happens all the time in Hollywood. This is why when people now talk about, as if it's a new thing, the Oscars are all political. The Oscars were political in 1942. When Orson Welles and Citizen Kane somehow didn't win Best Picture and Director, Orson got Screenplay, and he nearly booed him out of the auditorium. So forget that idea. Oscars are too political. Okay. Go back to 1942, you're going to say the exact same thing. But in 2001, Russell Crowe, in the movie A Beautiful Mind, which won Picture and Director, probably Russell Crowe's best performance next to Master and Commander, which I will say is the best movie of Russell Crowe's career, and it is his finest performance. But his second best performance, for all of the audience manipulation kind of stuff and the tug at the heartstrings moments, technically it is a spectacular, sensational performance by Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind. A character that grows and changes. And the movie pulls all kinds of sleight of hand, all sorts of misdirection on its audience, and does it well, really well. And Russell had won the Oscar the previous year. And here comes a movie which history has not been so kind to, Training Day. Antoine Fuqua, huge talent. Denzel Washington, already needed no introduction. And Ethan Hawke, great. Performances and the direction, great. The movie's not that good. I'm sorry, it's not. It's okay. And I'm all right with stories that show rogue cops and cops who maybe don't exactly have their heart in the right place, even though there are times where they're going to do their job correctly, quote unquote. When Denzel won that Oscar over Russell, it felt like Al Pacino 9 years earlier. It felt like we're giving this guy what amounts to a Lifetime Achievement Award. They didn't need to. Think about how many great performances Denzel has given since 2001. Even in movies like Antoine Fisher. I mean, the guy has money. He's legitimately in the conversation for GOAT. The movie Flight, that is an unbelievable performance. And you know that there are a lot more than just that. The idea, though, is it felt like they gave it to Denzel because he was due and Russell won last year. And it always bothered me. It always bothered me. But then, as I said, the guys worked together again on Ridley Scott's American Gangster, and another great Denzel performance, where he goes from jolly to murderous, a little bit like Warren Beatty and Bugsy, where the character is so tricky and he's so quirky and unpredictable horrible violence is always lurking just around the corner. And it was an unconventional role for Russell, playing essentially a basic New York Police Department detective. Richie Roberts, a real guy. As far as Virtuosity, though, it's forgettable. The story doesn't stay with you when it's over. But there are movies where just the pairing of performers makes it a must-see. And American Gangster is a great movie. Virtuosity is not. But to see these guys, and also because they are at completely different points in their lives and careers a dozen years later in American Gangster. Denzel had won his Oscar. Russell had won his Oscar. And Russell is registering differently. He's actually not trying to take the spotlight. He's just acting. He does a great job. Almost kind of hit the New York accent. And Ridley Scott's direction in American Gangster is also top-notch. That's a longer movie, I know, but it never feels slack. And there is not much in there that you say, well, they could lose 20 minutes. And no, I don't agree. I think it's the perfect length. Now, Virtuosity is on, it's streaming free on Amazon Prime. I always say free, you know what I mean. You have to pay for it. But it's on Amazon Prime, and it's on Paramount Plus, and I think MGM Plus as well. So if you have those services, you don't even have to think about ponying up a couple of dollars or whatever. You can just stream it. And the film is a curiosity. It's a bit of a historical relic. And if you are a fan of The Matrix, Dark City, or any of those kind of futuristic sci-fi, even a Blade Runner, it's worth checking out just from the conceptual standpoint and the way that Brett Leonard, the script is not very good, but the way the director stages the action, and there's a lot of early era green screen and computer work and stuff, and some of it is actually, for the day, top notch. They should have waited until the script was stronger, because you will see the components of a successful science fiction action movie were there, especially with the 2 home run hitters in the cast. The film just doesn't get there. But the idea that both guys went on to bigger and better things almost immediately. I mean, Denzel Washington, Crimson Tide was shot at the same time, huge hit, Gene Hackman. And Denzel also did, he had done Devil with a Blue Dress. Boy, was he busy. Holy shit, that's also 1995 with Don Cheadle. And then Denzel did Courage Under Fire, got a lot of Oscar buzz for that. Didn't get nominated. But Russell continued to work, and then he got LA Confidential. That was the key. And he didn't happen into LA Confidential. It's the fact that not just casting directors, but people in Hollywood were looking at this guy, and I'm convinced it's what he did in The Quick and the Dead. That anybody who saw that said, I want to work with this guy. He is mesmerizing. He has the perfect look, the perfect voice. This is a guy. He's on his way up with a bullet, as they say. And there was a lot of that kind of chatter with Denzel a decade earlier. The first time people saw Denzel in the film with George Segal, was it Carbon Copy? He's registering differently. He's so young, he looks like a kid. But this was not like every other actor. It was very plain to see in the case of Denzel. And he got an Oscar nomination for films like the movie Cry Freedom with Kevin Kline and in Glory. Some people just have the magic. Both of these guys have the magic. Even today, Russell's a little older. That movie he did a couple of years ago, Unhinged, I love him in the movie, but it's not a good movie. But when focused and when given a role that is a real meaty kind of role, Russell's still capable of great things. And I even enjoyed him playing Zeus in the Thor movie, Love and Thunder. The movie is completely absurd, but he is hilarious. And there were a lot of people that objected to the fact that they kind of turned Zeus into a stand-up comedian. I know Taika Waititi, people don't like it the way that he took the character of Thor. I thought the film was super entertaining. It's not as good as Ragnarok, but just to see Russell Crowe giggling and laughing and smiling and doing crazy shit like firing lightning bolts out of his fingers and dancing around, I thought he was the highlight of the film. I don't really even remember that much of what Thor did, but I sure as hell remember Russell, and that's the screen presence. That's somebody who is memorable. And the image of Russell Crowe enjoying a sushi lunch in Virtuosity is the first thing I think of when I think of the movie Virtuosity. 29 years ago today, I was at the movies at Sunrise Mall, Massapequa, to see the movie that I was pretty sure was not going to be that good. The early word wasn't great, and I don't think any of the New York papers, I didn't buy all the papers. We got Newsday at home, but I was the sort of person, remember, I was right in the middle of my NYU tenure at that point. I was 21, and I was the sort of person who, I wasn't on the internet yet, I used to go to stores just to check out the movie reviews in the newspapers. Now that is something that nobody has to do that, and hasn't had to do that since about 1996, 97. But I did that, and none of the New York papers gave Virtuosity a favorable review. The fact that it was even screened for critics was good. It meant, okay, it's not a complete catastrophe. But I think Newsday gave it 1.5, the Daily News 2, and the Post might have given it 2.5 just because this Russell Crowe, this guy is terrific. But nobody gave it a thumbs up, and I believe both Siskel and Ebert on their show that week gave it a thumbs down. But I saw it, and I recommended it to people. It's not great, but it's an entertaining way to pass 2 hours. And the actors come to play. They give the best they can. The limited, not very imaginative screenplay. Imaginative visuals, script needed work. 29 years ago today, August 4th, 1995, Virtuosity, directed by Brett Leonard and starring future Oscar winners for Best Actor, Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington. This has been episode 267 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday morning here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode sooner than you think. Until then, peace.